Easy now.
I'm gonna be free or die. I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones.
You have made it 100 miles to freedom. Would you like to pick a new name to mark your freedom?
Phantom. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. I'm wading through muddy waters. You know I got a made up mind, and I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on.
Harriet, welcome to the Underground Railroad.
And I know what's around the bend might be hard to face 'cause I'm alone, and I just might fail, but Lord knows I'll try. Shine stars lit up the sky. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home.
Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy Black History Month. And welcome to the Q from Mamie to Regina. We hear your cry. My name is Pamela A. Davis. I am the founder and CEO of a beautiful organization called Queen of Resilience, where we are increasing mental health awareness one queen at a time. Our mission is to teach individuals how to be resilient in every area of their life by increasing mental health awareness, mentorship, and professional development. So we decided for this month, for Black History Month, is to have a much needed conversation with family members who have lost their loved ones. In the past couple of months, suicide has been in the media, and there is more talk of mental health being a crisis. Well, I personally believe that it has always been a crisis even before the pandemic, but the pandemic has brought the mental health crisis to the forefront when we're talking about depression, anxiety, and etc. So I want to take the time before we hop into this conversation for these ladies to introduce themselves. They have powerful stories, they are resilient, and it's important for us to share our stories so we can be able to help someone else. So I want you to introduce yourself and name the person who you lost. Tell us a little bit about that person. I'm going to start with Miss Tayana Hayes.
Hi, thank you, Pam. My name is Tiana Hayes. I am a counselor and I lost my brother, Joseph Hayes.
Thank you, Tayana. I appreciate you. Miss Darlita Adams. Miss Darlita, can you unmute yourself for me?
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darlita Adams, and I am a principal of an elementary school here in St. Louis, Missouri. I lost my only son, David Johnson, in 2019, right before the pandemic, and still as I'm thriving through having breast cancer, being diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years before that. So, yeah, that's why I'm here today, to share how I'm making it through all of those different things that have affected my life in the past 4 years.
Thank you. Thank you. Miss Marquita Mitchell.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marquita Mitchell. I work for the VA. I actually counsel family members when they have lost a loved one. So to lose my son, I can't say that it really prepared me, but it did give me some insight on how to handle things a whole lot better and different. My son was 18 years old and he was killed. His name is Cameron Dorsey.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Marquita. Miss Brittany Clarkson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Pam. My name is Brittany Clarkson. I am a health education specialist in Houston, Texas, and I lost my sister at 27 years old in October of 2016 to suicide. And I've also experienced just living with family members who have mental health challenges, as well as some personal grief and suffering through 2 miscarriages. So I really appreciate this conversation on grief, and I think it's going to be an excellent thing for people to hear.
Awesome. Well, as these ladies have said, they have shared just a little bit of their stories, but grief, I personally believe, because I lost my mother in 2019, I lost my father in 2020. So when we're talking about grief, I don't believe that you know about grief until it comes into your world and it comes into your household. So when we think about from Mamie to Regina, we hear your cry. Emmett Till passed away in 1955 from violence and racism. Regina King's son, Ian Alexander, just passed due to suicide. And then we had Miss USA 2019, Chesley Chris, who passed due to suicide as well. When I was looking on LinkedIn one day, I saw a post from her mother, which is April Simpkins. And I'm going to read that. It stated, in her private life, she was dealing with high functioning depression, which she hid from everyone, including me, her closest confidant, until very shortly before her death. So when it came to Chesley Chris, people saw her as a person, her friends, her coworkers, and even her family, a person that was upbeat, a person that was always smiling, but she was suffering in silence. So today we want to have a conversation with the family members to see how it is to experience loss. What does that feel like? What do you have to go through? The ups and the downs of losing someone that you love, losing someone that you were close to. So I believe in everything that you grow through is for a reason, and it's not just for you, but it's for someone else. I'm also a firm believer that you have to make your voice known. So, ladies, we're going to hop into this conversation. And the first question I would like to ask is, when you hear the phrase make your voice known, what is the first thing that comes to mind? And we can go with Tayana.
Yes. First thing that comes to mind for me is advocacy and justice when I think of using my voice.
I love it. Anybody else want to add to that? When
Sure,
you hear
I'll add to it. When I hear "make your voice known," to me it sounds like a response to not previously having your voice heard, and specifically when it comes to suicide, and especially in the Black community, is not something that's widely talked about. So it's not something that we are making our voice known or being heard in regards to suicide in the Black community. And so I get to thinking about, why hasn't our voice been heard? Why haven't we been speaking up? What barriers are there to discussing suicide and grief in the Black community? And they come in a lot of different forms. I think a lot of things lend itself back to racial injustice, and being stifled and being silenced. And what can we gain and what can we benefit from finally saying enough is enough? It's time to speak out, and not just speak out, but make sure that we are heard and listened to.
Whew. So Tayana said advocacy, and Brittany said enough is enough, and it is time to let our voices be known. That's amazing. Anyone else want to add to that?
I do. I just want to talk about how there is power in our voice, and with us being silent, we're not using our voice to help our community. I think it was Miss Marquita Mitchell who also lost her son, who works for the VA. Miss Mitchell, my son was in the military, and while in the military, he developed paranoia and PTSD. That's how my son came back home. So the mental health was very prevalent in what he was dealing with every day, and how he tried to mask his mental health was not through the use of the therapists that were afforded to him through the VA, or even me offering him to go to therapy and counseling with him. So that's something that's a stigma in the Black community, is reaching out for support for therapy, to help us with the mental health that we're dealing with. Based upon what I shared with you earlier, my mental health was exacerbated as a result of me losing my son and the diagnosis of breast cancer. And so I did reach out to medical professionals, and I sought a therapist as well as a medication to help me get through my grief and all of the other depression that had come about in my life, with everything that I had going on. So, yes, I think that there's power in our voice, and we can't continue to be silent about it.
Mm.
Um, we can't continue to say that it's a Black thing. It's a everybody thing now. Everybody's suffering from some type of mental health or depression or something that's going on in their lives, and it's time for us to get the support that we need, and not lead a life that's in silence anymore.
That's awesome. It is power in our voice. And sometimes we still have to go when we have anxiety, when we have depression, when we're shaking, when we're crying, because these things are hurtful. They have happened. So we still have to push through. So that's good. Miss Marquita, did you want to add anything to that?
I will just say, to piggyback off of everything of what each and everyone said, pretty much it just sums up, it's time for a change. It really is. We have been silenced too long, and our voice has always been there. We just need to learn how to use it and use it in a proper way. So it's time. It's time for a change.
Whew. I told you all that these ladies are powerful. We just getting started, but it is time for a change to make your voice known and talk about the issues, especially when it comes to mental health. Talk about those issues that you are growing through. Have you all ever been afraid to speak out about losing your loved one? And if so, how have you overcome this? Miss Darlita? Uh-huh.
I I haven't been afraid about speaking out about my loved one. It's just very emotional for me. So I'm holding it together right now today. The fear is not there. It's the hurt and the pain that I feel that's more makes it more difficult for me to speak out about the passing of my only son. But I've had some support, and I'll talk about that later if we get into it. And I continue to have support with that. But yeah, it's not that I'm afraid. I'm more afraid of how I feel when I do speak out about it. Today, I'm holding it together for you ladies, but it's a lot.
Yes, ma'am. I definitely understand that. It is. It's like you want to talk about it, but it's like you're almost fearful of the emotion that's going to come behind it. So we're going to take this slow. We're going to take this slow. So anyone else want to add to that?
Um, I just kind of want to speak on for me. The loss of my brother was something very different for me. He was killed, and that form of grief was just a different level of surprise and unexpectancy compared to the loss of someone by like a health condition or age and things like that. And so for me, I think I did catch myself being afraid about speaking about it because I didn't know anyone that had experienced someone being killed. So I didn't know, like, would somebody understand my thoughts? Would they understand my feelings to be able to share them? So it was a barrier for me to overcome, like she said, the kind of that fear of the feeling, as well as, will people understand the confusion that I have about losing someone at the loss of someone else's hands. That was something I just couldn't fathom how to process. Um, so yeah, it was a challenge for me to speak out and to identify it. I had to seek therapy and process it. I definitely did.
Yes, ma'am. Anybody else want to answer this question?
Um, like I said, mine was never afraid. It was more of just the hurt behind it. It's the anger that would have came out, the trying not to be bitter when you're upset, when you're mad. So people used to always say, you can talk it out. That's how you get your healing. That's how you be able to let things out, is by talking about it. I do agree to a certain extent. I do agree to that. But it took someone to tell me, Marquita, you have a testimony that can help someone else. And that's when I had to say, okay, God, help me remove my hurt, my pain. I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to be angry. And I had to make that choice. So it was never that I was afraid. It was just a part of the outcome of talking about it, the frustration and the hurt and the pain.
Hmm. Hmm. How do we deal with the bitterness?
Whew. That's a that's a powerful, it's bitterness creeps up in you when you don't even really know that it has landed. It's in you. You really don't know it. You just think you're going about your everyday living, like you're fine. You're not upset. You're not angry. And before you know it, the way you start to comment on things, how you respond, where you can see where the bitterness is taking place. So I really just had to, acknowledge it. I'm bitter. I'm hurt. I'm mad. So, and I had to ask God, how do I let this go? And he just told me forgiveness. I have to forgive.
Wow, that's good. Anybody else want to answer that?
I think for me, when we talk about like the emotion of anger, it is a hard thing to try to break through with grief. We're all black women sitting at this table, and so there's this stereotype and this stigma about what a black woman, an angry black woman, looks like. And so, in grief, in feeling angry, and like she said, bitter about something that you feel was unjust, trying to identify how should my anger look. and figuring out like how do I give myself the right to be angry and to feel it, and like she said, acknowledge it, whether it be something publicly, saying it and talking it through with someone else, or just how you move day to day, and not just acting like it didn't happen or that you're not upset. Like, how do I acknowledge it and allow myself to process it? That's a hard thing to identify with. And for me, I think it was just a self-reflection and affirming that I'm allowed to be supported, because despite the stereotypes, despite the stigmas, as a Black woman, I'm allowed to be supported. I'm allowed to feel, and I had to give myself that right in order for me to take the next steps of reaching out for help, or making changes so that I can function in a healthy way. Or else I was going to stay in that, like she said, kind of just stay in that bitterness and kind of just sit and try to put it on the back burner when I know, it's just something not sitting right in my spirit.
Yeah, that's really good what you said, that you are allowed to be supported, because as Black women, we believe that we have a superwoman cape, that we are superheroes. And sometimes we just have to throw that cape away and have that moment to really feel those emotions, to really cry, to really say, I feel broken at this moment. And how do I grow through this? What resources are out there for me to really move forward? Though I am grieving, still moving forward with purpose. So when I think about this conversation, and what made me want to have this conversation is looking at the ABC series Women of the Movement. Of course, with Mamie Till and Emmett Till's story. And at the beginning of the first episode, she said her son was simply a good boy. Sometimes when someone passed, we say, well, they died of suicide, or they died of violence, or they had cancer. And who was this person? Let's not focus on not always what they died of. Who was this person? So I want you all to take the time to tell us about your loved one that passed. Tell us about their characteristics, their personality, so people can know that side of them, instead of always focusing on the suicide and the violence. Who was this person? So, Brittany?
Yeah, so when I knew you were going to ask this question, it just brought a smile to my face, because I definitely try to remember my sister and who the life that she lived and who she was. And so my sister that I lost, Taylor, she was actually a twin. And so my twin sisters and I are 18 months apart. So growing up, there's a lot of people who thought we were triplets, because we were so close in age and we looked alike. And they were always very adamant, we are twins. She's not a part of us. Don't get that confused. But my sister Taylor, it was, very loving. And she pursued, when we got older, she pursued acting. So she did drama in high school. She did drama at Lindenwood, and she was always her best self on the stage. And she was an actress and a thespian, through and through, and loved the performing arts. But she was a character at home too. So she was always making us laugh. I tell everyone that I meet that my sister was just the corniest person on earth. She would put her name in the songs and sing about herself. And she would tell jokes where she would laugh and crack up before she even got to the punchline. She just brought a lot of joy to our family, and she was very jovial. She had a very strong relationship with God. She got very, very attached to people. And there were people that we didn't even know that she had, gotten attached to after she had passed, when they just, came to pay their respects and would tell stories. We sat in the theater, the Black Box Theater at Lindenwood, and to hear these stories from these strangers about just the fun and the adventures that they went on, and how Taylor made everyone around her laugh and held their hand when they cried. She was the person that was there and was always lighting up the room.
Thank you for sharing, Brittany. Yes, I love it. Tayana? You are mute, Tayana.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
My brother Joseph, he was a very caring person, very artistic. When I say different types of skills, he can pull out a bag that you would never even think of, for it's like drawing, tattoos. Just being able to help somebody out and learn was kind of his thing. If he didn't know it, he was going to figure it out. Whether it be fixing watches, fixing cars, just being there when you needed a him to be is something that I really, when I reflect on my brother, that sticks with me, is that we operate from this space of love always, and to just be caring and to outpour to other people when you see someone in need was definitely him. He was definitely active and looking to learn as much as he could. Like, school was not just the objective, pursuing a degree and sticking in that one area. He was like, uh, a health junkie of like, let me learn this about my health, let me learn this about the world, and bring this back to people and let them know so that they can be better. And I think that's the awesome part.
Thank you, Tayana. Miss Marquita.
Cameron was my bundle of joy. He was my firstborn. So funny. He was just amazing. He had a beautiful smile that just brightens up a room. He was known for his smile. He always had a way of making people laugh. He was so family oriented. He loved his family. He loved spending time with his family. He loved being around his family. Gifted, talented. I mean, everything about him that he was good at. He he was just, and he always wanted a little sibling, so I end up having a little brother, a son. They were 12 years apart, and when I say that he took care of his little brother, that was his joy. That was his, if you saw him, you saw his little brother. They just had a amazing relationship. So Cameron was just, he was different, but he was a good kid, a good kid.
Wow. Wow. Whew. I'm trying not to cry. Miss Darlita.
Okay, David was my only son, and he was the only son of his dad. David has an older sister, but he was the only boy. I have to tell you, he was very, very spoiled. He's very smart. Just thinking about all the good qualities about him. I remember when he was like 2 years old, he used the word, "Mom, I'm going to be more responsible." And I'm like, what do you know knowing the word responsible? You're only 2 years old. So very smart, had a gift for social studies and language. Um, One of the things was he liked to have fun, lots of fun. I think that's what got him caught up going to the military, because one of the things he talked to me about was how they always were partying all the time. He liked working with his hands. He did go to Harris Stowe for a bit. My husband and I, we both graduated from Harris Stowe State University as educators. He went there for a bit, but we found out that he liked working with his hands more than that type of schooling. So he got an associate's degree in electrical work. So he was an electrician by trade. That's what he liked to do. And he actually did a lot of work here in the house, at my house, his dad's house, and out in the community helping people with their electrical needs. So that's David. He was really a loner. He was an only child. He didn't have a whole bunch of friends. He didn't like being all outside like that, very private person. But yeah, that was my son. I was surprised when he decided he was going to go to the military, because he never liked camp. He was like, I don't ever want to go to camp. I am not that type of person. So for him to go to the military, that was kind of shocking to his dad and I. But what wasn't shocking, we knew why he went. His dad is a Marine. His sister was in the Army, and then that's kind of his life, that military life on that side. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Miss Darlita. So, yes, we want to stand up and speak out about losing someone through suicide or losing someone through violence or any mental health issues, but we want to talk about also who they were. So I really appreciate you all for sharing that. Talking about mental health and talking about suicide sometimes is difficult. So How do we start the conversation about suicide as a community, and what actions should we take? And anyone can take that question.
I'll go ahead and take it. Just the lead. Being a counselor, mental health is my jam. I could talk days about this, but one of the things that I feel like before we even get into, the reactive things of suicide and, someone passing, like before it happens, I think the education portion of mental health is lacking. So that idea of us just being more educated about mental health, like when you're in elementary school, middle school, they're teaching about physical health, of the signs of a stroke, the signs of heart attack, about weight. They even have like DARE and sex education programs, but mental health programs are lacking. And so I think the idea of not being reactive and waiting till we see, distress and trauma within someone, to then in the beginning processes of learning, for kids to be able to learn, what mental health is and how to identify within themselves so that they can normalize the feelings and the symptoms, because we all look different within mental health, even with the same diagnosis. Depression is going to look different. Anxiety is going to look different in everybody. And so to learn, hey, what does my mental health look like? How do I care for my mental health at an early age? I think is something that is important for us to do better in, for us to be able to then say, okay, how do I respond to, when things are a little bit severe and I'm not able to function the way that I know that I should be functioning, or that I would like to function. I think that's the first thing for me. And then the other one is normalizing expressing feelings. Being brown and Black people, we do not want to share those vulnerable feelings. And, a lot of times we feel like in order to be vulnerable, to share things that don't make you feel good, that leads to us being uncomfortable or it being a problem to someone else. And I don't think it should be a problem to be vulnerable and to share that I'm disappointed, that I'm sad, that I'm angry. It doesn't have to, be a problem to someone else or necessarily be a problem to myself. But I think that's how we identify it. And so we take on those capes and those hats of, I'm just going to keep it to myself and, and keep on trucking and keep on moving, when, it's a part of our human nature to express feelings, even as irrational as they may be. We have to process them. So I think those are two important things that we would be able to work on to tackle suicide and a lot of other mental health issues a lot better.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Yes,
I completely agree with that. I think that mental health education is extremely important. I'm not a therapist, I'm a health educator, but I've worked on college campuses just trying to bring awareness to mental health, and I love Queen of Resilience because one, nobody wants to be resilient, right? In a perfect world, nobody would have to be resilient. But the truth is we are forced to because of what is going on in the world. But I have even caught myself, talking to college students, and they're talking about how they're stressed about, going home, or stressed about tests, or stressed about tuition. And I'm sitting here thinking, baby, I got a mortgage, I got a child, I got a husband. You don't know what stress is, right? But why is there this comparative, to them in that moment? That's affecting their mental health. And just because it is something that I've also experienced and was able to move past and grow through, they're still back where I was at that same age. So I think making sure that, we are supporting, especially our Black and brown, our people of color that are younger than us, that are coming up and finding their way, supporting them in the state that they are and not in the state that we're in, because they still have their processes and their issues and their circumstances that they need to work through. And by dismissing them as to, well, that's nothing compared to, the stress over here, it's not cultivating an environment of being able to share, or being able to, for them to feel comfortable, sharing that they're struggling mentally. So I think just being there and being an unbiased and non-judgmental ear will go a long way. I know with my sister, her mental health struggles started way before we noticed it, and we just didn't notice because we just thought, her stress was different. We all stress. We're all having, to adjust to this world, but we really didn't pay attention. And well, I know I, really didn't pay attention because I was more in a state where I was comparing it to my current state, and it just didn't seem as if, anything that I thought I should have to pay extreme attention to, because it was different from my own.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to speak on this. Being an educator and at the elementary level, when I first started this role, social emotional learning wasn't something that we talked about that much in schools. And over the years, it has become more talked about in the schools. What triggers students, working with students on their social emotional learning. I'm very fortunate to work in the school district of University City, where we use a program called Panorama, where we work with the students. They have a survey that they take a couple of times throughout the year just to check on their well-being. And even when I meet with the superintendent, she always asks, how are the children? And how are you? And when she's asking those questions, she's asking, how are they doing socially, emotionally, and how am I doing with my mental health? So I really, really appreciate that. It comes with a bank of questions. And so we do a lot of work with that. We do restorative circles with our students. We're actually giving them a voice, having them to talk, to express how they're feeling, and then teaching them how to cope and giving them strategies. Those weren't things that were done when I first started education, and even being a principal in my first year. So I think that we're making those steps, and I think we need to continue those steps, and they need to be a part of every school system, in which they are. But how does it look? How are we really, really taking the time to do that work, to make sure that our students' well-being is being met even when they're in school with us? Because they're with us most of their waking hours. They're in schools. When they go home, it's time for them to get dinner, get homework, and all those things, get the shower and go to bed. So we have to make sure, as educators, that we are meeting their needs, not just their academic, but their social emotional as well. And I'm complete.
Yes, ma'am. I definitely appreciate you all for bringing in your backgrounds into this conversation, because initially we're looking for panelists. It's like, okay, we're looking for someone who have lost their loved one, but I did not know that we was going to have a counselor or an educator or someone that works at the VA that deals with families who have lost their loved ones. So it's very important to have that. Miss Marquita, did you want to add anything to that question?
I would just agree with what everyone said. And my thing was, like she said, it's coming up. They downplayed mental health. No one ever really wanted to talk about it. They didn't think it existed. They didn't think, it was just, and we openly joked about it all the time, of saying, oh, you're crazy, or you're bipolar, you're not right. And, now we use the word toxic. I mean, we're just using a lot of words instead of calling it what it is. We have some mental health issues, and it needs to be addressed. It does. It should start in the household. It should start in the school system. It should start everywhere, so people can be able to feel free. Back in the day, we used to hear, what goes on in this house stays in this house. So it's just a lot of things that we grew up on. We have to come back to. Some of it was good for us, but some of it wasn't right. So we have to get to the real issue. Mental health is real. It is.
I thank you. Thank you, Miss Marquita. I really appreciate your saying that, because mental health is real. And just because we grew up a certain way don't mean we cannot make those changes. We have to make those changes that say, yes, I lost a loved one and I cannot deal with this by myself. The community, my family, my friends, my coworkers, they cannot help me with this issue. So I need to reach out to a therapist. I need to reach out to someone that can help me. And I'm going to be honest with you. That's what I did when my mom first passed in 2019. The day that she passed, I looked at my brother and I said, I'm going to therapy. I have to do this. And to be honest with you all, God and therapy works. God and a great community and therapy works. I mean, it has been amazing. Yes, Miss Dwalita, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I did. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that helped me a lot, my son passed away on October 6, 2019. In December, by the time it happened, I was so distraught. My doctors and everyone were helping me, my medical professionals, because they didn't want me to even have to deal with the stress as I had just become in remission for breast cancer. So it's so funny. They both, different people, referred this organization to me. It's called Grief Share, and it's Christian based. And when we talked about emotions earlier, we talked about all how do we feel with, were we bitter or those things. We're going to experience all kinds of emotions. But the shortest scripture in the Bible is Jesus wept. And that was at the death of his friend Lazarus. So for us to cry, we're going to experience all of those: anger, bitterness, sadness, joy, all of those things. But what helped me through was God and my belief in the Lord, the Grief Share program, and of course, my therapy. I'm no longer on any medication. I am now a Grief Share facilitator. I've been with it ever since I got involved in December of 2019. And that's what has helped me through this process and grieving for my child. And I want to say, I have ambushes. There are ambushes. I remember going into West County Mall and seeing his best friend, and we just looked at each other because I wasn't able to reach out to him when my son passed away. But that was his best friend in high school. And he was like, all he could say to me was, "It's true." And we both broke down in the middle of West County Mall. But now I'm stronger. Normally the tears would come, but they're not coming as much because I'm getting stronger. I'm going to start using my voice more to talk about mental health in the community and actually doing my work and to help our community get away from the stigma that mental health is not real. It's real. And yes, we can tell people. That's their job, to help us get through it so that we're okay.
Woo! I told you these women are powerful. I mean, what you just said, and I love the example in the organization. When you first told me about that organization, I'm like, oh my God, I may have to join this, like Grief Share. And I love that you talk about where you was and where you are now. There is growth. You may have those moments where you still cry, but you can see the growth. And when you can see the progress, you can empower someone else to say it's okay that you have lost a loved one. It's okay that you have had moments where you feel like, can I really do this? Like losing my mom, like, can I really do this? Can I really do life, with losing my mom? Yes, you can. Because why? Because that person wants you to move forward and forward in that. And I think about one of my good friends. She told me when my mom passed away, actually on the day that my mom passed away, she said, I know what you can talk about now, sis. You can talk about grief. And with tears in my eyes, I shook my head like, no. And what I'm doing now, talking, talking about grief because it's needed. We have to make our voices known. So I just want to reset this conversation. We are having a phenomenal time of these powerful ladies sharing their authentic stories, being real with you all, talking about their experiences, talking about who their loved ones was actually, who were they? What did they do? Did they have a smile on their face? They are really going forth of the changes that they have been through and how to overcome it. So we just wanted to reset the room. Thank you all for joining the QOR conversation from Mamie to Regina. We hear your cry. So our next question is, how have you been coping during the pandemic with grief? How have you been coping during the pandemic with grief?
Speak on that. Again, as I said, my David passed away in October of 2019, right before COVID was, prevalent here in the United States. I was actually at home from that time and watched COVID over in China. I watched it on the news. When I tell you, when David passed away, it took me out. I didn't go to work for months. I couldn't do that. And now I'm back at work, and I thank God for it. But I don't think David would have been able to do this COVID thing. He liked to be outside, as they say, as the kids say, outside. But the way I've coped, Grief Share really, really helped. When Grief Share went to Zoom. That really helped me a lot. Being here with my husband, he helped a lot. And most importantly, my relationship with God. Because this is the thing that came to my mind when my son passed away, when David passed away, was he belonged to God first. And I had to thank God for giving me the 35 years that I had with him. And that's how I get through. That particular statement is how I take care of Dorlita. But during the pandemic, I experienced more loss. My father-in-law passed from COVID in January of 2020. Then, as we had his funeral, my father passed like 6 or 7 days later. Wasn't for COVID, from COVID, was just from being sick. And so to deal with that, it's been my family, my friends, the Lord, my grief share program, just people pouring into us from afar, even though we couldn't visit when it all was happening, but just people loving on us and just knowing that we had God there to lean on when times got difficult. My grief share coach, her name is Miss Pat. We call her Miss Pat. We could call her at any time, be it 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. This is her ministry. She will talk to you. She will support you to get you through. And one of the things that also got me through is that when people say you're still grieving, there's no time limit on grief. So I want to put that out there before we get through with this conversation. There is no time limit on grief. You take as long as you need to heal. And I am complete.
She said there is no time limit on grief. So when you have individuals say, like she just said, are you still grieving? My answer is yes. Because that was her son. That was Brittany's sister. That was Miss Marquita's son. That was Tayana's brother. Yes, I'm still grieving. So I thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to add to that question?
I would say my son, he was killed February the 19th of 2020. So last weekend was actually his 2-year anniversary. Not being able to be around people, it took me to my knees because I couldn't, there was no one around. We couldn't go visit. We couldn't do anything. It was nothing. It took me to my knees. I can honestly say it drew me closer to God. And sometimes he needs to separate us from things. And I'm telling you, I tried to go back to work and everything. I tried it. I fell and broke my ankle. Don't even know how I fell. But everyone kept saying, you're moving too fast. You're trying to go back to work. You're trying to get back into life. But I felt like I had another son. So I had to get myself together. I couldn't stay there. And it was like 2020. I mean, I wasn't at work. When I say God set me down, he set me down. I had to be here for my youngest son. I had to support myself. But through it all, he just reminded me, I know you hurt. I know you are hurt. I'll tell anyone, as a mother, our job is to take care of our child, to make sure that they're okay. So it hit me hard when my son was killed in the next room. I am his protector. I'm his mother. So when you come to my house where we lay at and you take my son's life, I had to deal with that. But I cannot say I did it by myself because he left me a good support team. When I say my family and my friends right today still call, still come by, still check on me. That's what we need because we can't, God, he sustains us. He said, hey, cast all your cares on him. He said, I will never leave you or forsake you. I am here. You may not understand, but trust the process. Grief is real, but you can get through it. And it's not a win. It's just keep going. The waves come, they get, sometimes them waves will hit you, knock you right on your knees. That's where you need to be. So he's, like I said, he's brought me closer to him.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to mention one other thing. I would be remiss if I wasn't to say anything about my illustrious sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. My God, those women right there, those women, when anything happens, when I reach out or they feel something's going on, they still call me to this day. I'm just checking in, sis. I get a text message, just thinking about you, sis. I love my sorority and the sisters that I have in there. They also help sustain and keep me. So I thank God for them as well. He gave me that support. He knew what I was going to need when I didn't know what I was going to need.
Ooh, I'm trying not to cry. I am trying not to cry because community is everything. When you are growing through grief, community is everything. You need that friend, that sorority sister, that brother, that mother, that father, whoever that is in your life, that sometimes you just cry. Sometimes you just need someone to, who you just like, oh my God, why did you take this person away from me? And then he begins to tell you that I am near the brokenhearted. I will comfort you during that time. I will be there for you. And I believe someone said that God took him first. What did you say, Miss Marquita? Was that Miss Marquita or
I said that he belonged to God first.
when you said that, I thought about that. My mother belonged to God first. My father belonged to God first. Tayana's brother belonged to God first. Brittany's sister belonged to God first. You all's son belonged to God first. And that's what we have to look at it as. But that experience of growing through grief, it brings you closer to God. But I'm going to tell you what it also do. It pushes you into purpose. It brings you closer to God and it pushes you into purpose. So I'm just gonna stop because I have chills right now. Yes, ma'am. Oh,
Grief is the love that you have for your loved ones. That's what it is. It's the love. That's what grief is. And that's what I've learned. It's the love, the tears, the emotions. It's the love that you have for those who have transitioned. That's what it is. And if you didn't feel that, then I would be saying, then what's wrong with that person? Always remember, it's the love that you have for the ones who have transitioned in your life. And I'm complete.
That's good. Brittany?
So I agree with absolutely everything that was said. And when I lost my sister, it was in 2016. So it wasn't, we weren't in pandemic times. But I think the way that we coped was really, like so many of you all said, just by leaning on the Lord and by crying out to God. Yes, we asked why. Yes, we asked, questions, but we found solace in God. And my father, who is a minister and evangelist, he really held our family together. I mean, he held down like 4 generations. And we were all spread out to the winds. We've got some of us were in Missouri at the time, some of us were in Texas at the time. And he kind of led us through this grief. This was his daughter. And he was really taking a lead in bringing the whole family along to try and figure this out and process it. And he developed this motto for our family that we still, use today. And that was stay together. And I tell students all the time that people were not meant to be isolates. We were never meant to be on an island all by ourselves. That's why sororities and fraternities exist. That's why families and friend groups exist, because we are meant to be together. We bound together in times of trouble. And that's what my dad did for our family. He reminded us that even though one of us has left, that the rest of us need to stay together and not drift apart, because that happens so often. And so with me, at the time that I lost my sister, I was actually about 7 months pregnant. And so I was being told, you need to be calm. You need to think of the baby. And it was just, I didn't know how to process it. So I pushed it, way, 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 way down. And I grieved, a bit, and I, was sad and remembered my sister and everything. But I won't say that I really, really grieved until I had my first miscarriage, and that was during the pandemic. And everything that I didn't process and everything that I didn't address from my sister's passing, it all came out when I had my first miscarriage. And I mourned and I grieved and I cried. And that's when I started therapy, because I couldn't handle it. But the one thing that I did bring with me from my sister's passing was my dad's motto for our family, and that was to stay together. So I really turned, like you said, I took that cape off, and I had to turn to my family, and I had to turn to my church and my friends and say, I need help. I need assistance. And I know my dad started Grief Share, so I'm very familiar with that. And I know it's a wonderful organization. And at the time, I was seeing my therapist, and I started a group called Hope Mommies, and it was other women who had lost pregnancies or their infants. So going back to just that sense of, we need other people. We need to surround ourselves. And as isolating as COVID was, I know that God has a plan, because there was Zoom and we were able to, get on virtual chats and everything. And though we were on lockdown, those avenues were still available. And I just am so thankful and grateful for it. But the community is huge. It's just absolutely, when you don't know how you're going to get through there, there's somebody in your village, there's somebody in your community who has gone through it, and just being able to lean on that.
Mm-hmm. That was powerful, Brittany. I love that you said that your father led the family, and even though he lost his daughter, he was still committed to leading you all to stay together. That's powerful. Anybody else want to add to that question? So I know all of you have experienced grief, and everybody is different when they are going through grief. But which stage of grief was the hardest for you to endure? Which stage of grief was the hardest for you to endure? Miss Marquita?
That it happened to me, that it happened to my son. That was something hard for me to accept. Because that was my baby. He was good. And I know he would have never done that to anyone. I know that from the bottom of my heart, because I raised him right. So it was not knowing that how could this happen? Why did this happen? I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I didn't. But God gave me where one of the boys got off, and I was sick to my stomach. I was sick. God, what happened? You told me vengeance is yours. You told me to sit back. You told me. I did everything. So when the young man got off, it hurted me. And I had to tell God, I'm hurt. And he gave me the story where Judas betrayed Jesus. And he just pretty much told me he may be free out here in this world, but he's not free in his mind. He betrayed Jesus, but he had to go back. He tried to go back and make things right, but he wasn't free in his mind. That's why he ended up killing himself. I wouldn't wish no parent, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, no parent to go through of losing a child. That is something that I wouldn't wish. No, it's nothing. So even sitting in that courtroom and watching that other mother, there was no remorse. There was nothing. All I can do is just pray for their hearts. Pray for, and be glad that you're sitting on that front row seat and not the other front row seat. Your son get another chance and another opportunity, but you have to be that example. You should allow him to take this right here and take it as a learning experience. So it's only been 2 years for me, but when I say it's been an up and down emotional roller coaster, waves here, waves there, And all I can say is he's always knocked me down on my knees. He has knocked me down on my knees. So I'll just tell anyone, grief, if you don't go through it the proper way, it's a way. Because some of us, we can use drugs, we can use alcohol, we can use sex, we can use all these other things. It's a proper way and it's a right way of grief. Because if you don't, that's where that mental health is going to come in at. And me and my son, we see a therapist. He was only 6 years old, waking up out of his bed. Police is everywhere. That was his best friend. So I have to support him. I don't know I couldn't even imagine sometimes how he's feeling. So now I'm going through his grief too. You know what I'm saying? It's like he'll come and say, "Mom," but he's strong though. He's strong. But it's one of them things. I just, yeah, I'm still at the level where and it's only been 2 years, but I do know that God is taking me through the process and I'm going to trust him.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to kind of piggyback off of Miss Marquita, for me, my brother died in August of 2020, so it hasn't been 2 years quite yet. So I still feel like I'm going through that wave. Things are up and down. They're not as severe as they were in the beginning, but I still have moments where I may experience anger or questioning certain things, or moments where I feel low and triggered. So I feel like they all, serve a purpose. Like you said, you have to go through the process. But I will say I know that the acceptance portion for me is something I'm like, man, to navigate, because we always want to I want to put a timeline on something. I want something to be done. I want to know I'm complete. And that's not, what this is. It's a process. It's a journey. And like you said, that God allows you to grieve and shows you your purpose a little bit clearer. And so with that, just navigating what's my new normal. A lot of people are like, it's not about, getting through it. It's just a new normal and trying to figure out what that will be and defining it for yourself, because my brother was one of my best friends, and so to imagine life without him is something that, just like a mother shouldn't have to do. In my mind, it's like, well, I never would have imagined this ever. And so going through all of those, and accepting myself, allowing myself to slow down and accept if I'm angry, if I'm, having questions, or if I'm having a low mood, to just embrace it. I think it's just a challenge, just because we want to keep going and we want it to be done and over with. And so the fact that I have to say, okay, you're still going through this, like, it's okay. And sit in that, like you said. And when I'm put to my knees, I'm put to my knees. And days that I can get up and I'm joyful, that that speaks volumes too, that I'm growing, right? But I would say I'm still navigating through it all, a year and a half in.
Miss Darlita, was it something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I always thought about the why stage. Why people say you can't question God, but I think about Job. I always go back to that and read about Job and how he went through. Job lost everything, all of his children. And Job got through it. But I also think about it's necessary for us to move forward. Like, how are we doing right now? What are our next steps? It's necessary. It was hard for me when I first heard this. This was that our loved one passed away. We did not. So it's a process. It just depends. I have learned from my journey that going to the cemetery is a trigger for me, and it sets me back. It's a setback for me. So I try not to go as often as I did in the past, but I do still go. That's the last resting place for our son. The other thing that I didn't share with you is that in my grief and how I'm moving forward is through my husband. When David passed away, we were actually getting ready to go to court for my husband's daughter, her mother, and her baby being murdered. So we were getting ready to go to court for that. And so that actually just went to trial after 9 years in April of last year. So not only have I experienced the grief of losing my only child, David, My husband also has experienced the grief of losing his only daughter, Brianna, and his grandson, Aiden. So we've experienced a lot of grief, and we know that it's God that sustains us and keeps us going each and every day. So this sometimes I feel like I'm stuck. I haven't. I'm going to tell you, I haven't cleaned up the area in the basement where my son lived yet. I can't. I'm not ready for that, and it's been 2 years. Do I want to move? Did I make rash decisions? I want to move. I want to buy a house. I don't want to be here because there's just too many memories of things that have been heartbreaking for us both. But that's our next step is to move. We didn't do it right away. Like you said, don't jump into relationships. Don't get married. Don't, even if you go to grief share, don't date somebody who's in grief share. Take your time. Take that time to heal and to get closer to the Lord. That's all I can say. And your family and your friends. And I'm complete.
Yes. Take the time to heal. We can't not, you can't rush grief. You can't think, oh, my loved one died in September, so in December, all of these emotions and feelings is going to be over. You cannot control the process of grief. So you have to be able to let it flow. If you have those days, I probably have told everybody, I probably have cried everywhere. And it's okay. It's okay. But as the day go by, as the months go by, as the years go by, you become better. You are able to cope with this thing called grief. Brittany, is there anything that you wanted to share on that particular question?
Just that, again, everything above, but also I think an important part of understanding grief is understanding that you are not going to get answers in a lot of cases. I think that when my sister died, I had a lot of questions. What was she going through? What was the breaking point? What, when, where, how? And those are answers I don't have because she took them with her. And just learning to be okay without having those answers. And similarly, when I had experienced the miscarriages, I have gone to every doctor that I could think of, and none of them have an answer. And so looking for those answers and, worrying myself and spending all this, energy is just hindering the grief process. And so just being aware that sometimes you don't get those answers, and you just have to be sensitive to what God has for you in the form of lessons rather than answers.
That's good. We always want an answer. We always want a solution. But God is the God who makes solutions. So we have to look towards him and be okay if he decide not to give us the answer, the answer that we want. So that's really, really good. When I think about grief and think about you all going through losing your loved one, I think about community and I think about support. And I know Mr. Alita talked about the support of our sorority, but I wanted to share this because I have my good sister Brittany on this live, and I think about when I'm trying not to cry, Brittany. When I think about when I was at the University of Missouri Columbia, I was a freshman, and my uncle passed away. He was a veteran. I worked for the VA as well, so when he passed away, it broke me. It did something to me. It did something to me academically. They basically said the night of his service, when I was hyperventilating, that I had an anxiety attack. So I was a freshman, not sharing a lot with my family. And Brittany was one of those friends, and we've been friends since 2007, off and on families, on careers, but still some way to be connected. So I think about the support. I think about that night when I had to go to the ER and Brittany was there. That God allowed her to have that patience, that connections. Like, sis, it's okay. I remember I used to check my pulse like all the time. I don't know if you remember this. I used to check my pulse all the time. And she was like, so stop checking your pulse, breathe, it's okay. And we need those individuals who can help us through those difficult things. So what does it mean to have that community? And first and foremost, before I get into that question, thank you, Brittany. I love you, sis. But what does it mean to have that community and that support when you are really growing through grief? I know Miss Darlita shared it just a little bit, and I know Brittany shared about her father making sure that families stay together. But what does that mean to you? Did that put a smile on your face? Does it give you energy to say, I can do this? Though I'm crying right now, I can make it through this.
And I'll go ahead and share because I remember that night very vividly. And you were going through some things that I didn't understand. But what I knew is that I had come to the University of Missouri and I had left my big family, right? I had lots of brothers and sisters. And like you and our friend Deanna, y'all were my sisters, y'all were my extended family. So I knew that I had to treat you all like I would treat my family back home. And I think going forward, that's how I've always thought of my friends in my community, in my circle, is just to be able to have someone there to lean on you. But specifically when it comes to grief, I feel like there's a lot of stigma associated with losing a family member, especially to suicide or especially to having a miscarriage. And I apologize if I'm speaking about that while I'm speaking about suicide. But I think they both have a lot of stigma that goes along with it that causes you to not want to talk about it and not want to reach out to people. Because for whatever reason, for me, it was a lot of shame. Shame that I wasn't able to be there for my sister like she needed, and shame that my body wasn't able to carry these babies to term. But it was those people that reached out to me when I didn't even want to speak to another human being that really pulled me through. I know that I have one soror that will reach out to me. So y'all repping Delta, but I got to throw my sweet Z5B in the mix. But I had one soror who was always on top of me. Alicia was texting me. She was calling me. She was FaceTiming me. She said, hey, you need to put some clothes on. How are you feeling today? Get up and do something good for yourself. And she stayed on me, and I did not want to hear. I didn't reply to many of her messages, but she stayed on me, and for that I'll forever be grateful, because that is the community that I didn't want, but that I really needed. And she may not ever understand what I went through, but she was there, and we're so many other people. But that community is it's essential.
Thank you for sharing, Brittany. Community is really essential. You need it. That's all I can say is that you really need community. Not when you're just not at graduations, not at just weddings or baby showers, or if you that person that like the party, not at just parties. You need community when you are growing through difficult times, and that really shows you who your community is.
One of the things I would like to say is I remember, this is something that I learned in Grief Share when David passed away, and I've thought about this more than ever now and how I treat people too. When David passed away, those first 2 or 3 weeks, everybody's around, right? Everybody's around to support you, to be there, but they have to go back to work. They have to go on with their lives. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So how do we continue to support each other? Like I said, when I hear that someone's loved one has passed, especially when someone has lost a child, I let them go through those first 2 and 3 weeks when everyone is there. And then that's when I come in, because I've experienced that and I know how it is. How do we get past that time? That's what was the difficult thing for me. When everybody was gone, the funeral was over, and we're back in our own daily lives. How do you cope with that? Again, my community showed up for me. Some of my sorors came and sat with me, and they would just bring me something to eat and just sit. And they would say, you don't have to talk. You don't have to say anything. I'm just going to be here with you, and we just watch TV together, or we pray together. And that's what I think is really missing, is how do we take care of each other once all of the funerals are over, and how do we continue to move forward? That's missing. So that's something that I would like to see us as a people get better with, because there are people who are still grieving the loss of their children 15, 16 years later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how do they get through that? I have a very my husband's former principal. She lost her daughter some years ago, years ago. But when David died, she reached out to me. She created a face. She's created just different things for her daughter, but she's still grieving, and we grieve together. We send one another messages, and we talk, just thinking of you, how strong you are. But we do need people. We need people. We need the community, and not just during those 3 weeks when you're going through the planning phase and
Mm-hmm.
after the funeral. We need that. That's important to our healing.
That was a good point that you made, that we always have the individuals during that planning stage and when our loved one has first passed on. But what about after those 3 weeks? When you're just sitting and streaming by yourself, do you have individuals that will be able to that you can connect with to help you through that process? Because yes, I believe in therapy, but you can't call your therapist every day. You can't call your therapist every minute. So you have to have other resources, other avenues, and what you have learned from your therapist, you have to take that and actually apply it to your life. So that was a good point that you said, Miss Darlita. Did anyone else want to add to that?
Um, I just agree with what everybody said, that community is key. For me, with grieving, I was in a completely different state from all of my family and friends, and so with also being in COVID, I think it was intentional for me to be able to have that space to sit down at home, but it also required me to reach out for help, like being that strong friend, and people knowing that I know how to deal with things. I was challenged with being able to say, okay, I need something and this is what I need. And, allowing my line sisters and my sorority sisters or my closest friends to come to me and support me, even though it wasn't that physical. You can't physically pop up at my house, but to be able to get those phone calls, or the one friend that I did have that physically was around every weekend, we would go out and do something, even with, something that was COVID friendly. And so I do think that it's so vital. It's still very valuable to me. It's still kept up, not just 3 weeks later, it's a year and a half later. And still I have people reaching out to me every week, and it's even evolved. And I think, look, when we talk about purpose and we talk about God, it showed me how, within purpose and within our relationships, how things are supposed to evolve, because I don't just talk about just the grief anymore. Those vulnerable feelings that I may have with my career or with family or just personal challenges as a woman, I'm able to now expand, those vulnerable feelings, and normalize them, and build upon them within the people in my community. And I think that's a blessing as well, because again, our community just kind of normalizes, oh, deal with everything on your own. Like, nobody needs to know everything. And I think it's a blessing and beauty to be able to share your experiences in a non-judgmental way with those around you.
That's good. Anybody else want to answer that question? And we are about to close this conversation. This has been powerful, you all. But I want each of you to take the time to answer this question. What would you tell someone else who may have recently lost their child, their sister, and their brother? Give them some encouragement. What would you actually say to them?
I can start off. I would say it's okay not to be okay. To be honest with yourself, give yourself that grace. Being vulnerable is hard, but allowing yourself and others to support you makes a difference. It can bring so much comfort to your life. There is no right way to grieve. There's no right way to do anything. And so I think those are the key things that I would tell anyone that's grieving the loss of someone that they love, that's close to them, is just allow yourself to be human, to feel, to be supported, and to take your time.
Thank you, Tayana.
I would agree with her. It's just about honesty with yourself. You have to make yourself vulnerable. You really do. Um, and I just say vulnerable because of a lot of times when you're holding all that in, no one can help you. No one can get you through it. Yes, like she said, sometimes they just come around and sit. They don't you don't always have to talk, but it's just sitting there, being in someone's presence, knowing that someone is there for you, is the key thing. Losing a loved one, it's hard, but it's part of the process. We all have to go someday. And like she said, to know that we were God's first, we belong to him. In his word, it say we all will go someday. So we just have to make sure the time frame within when we was born to when our day is gone, those that dash, we need to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do so we can see our loved ones again. So we can just be able to know that they're going to a better place. That helps us as well. So, I mean, yes, we have to go someday. But the thing is, what are we doing now? What are we doing now? That dash. And what can we do to see our loved ones again?
Yes, ma'am. I love it.
I would say that to someone that it's okay. I wrote my stuff down. I'm old school. So I would say that it's okay to grieve. It is. It's okay to grieve because grief is the love that you have for your loved one who has passed on. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel that. But I would say take the time to heal. That's what I'm hearing more. Take the time to heal and don't let people say to you that you still grieving. Yes, because grief has no limit. It has no time limit at all. And when people say to you, this is the one thing that really would say, so how did your child die? It's not about how he died. The point is he died.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. He died. And so learning how to cope with that, coming up with ways to protect yourself on how to have some words to say to people when they ask you certain questions, like you're still grieving. Grief has no time limit. Grief has no time limit. So that's what I would say.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Brittany or Tayana?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice was the a golden piece of advice that I got, and that was to give yourself grace. None of us know or have the perfect way to grieve. We just do the best that we can when we're in the situation. So give yourself grief, and then live in your loved one's memory. Again, it's not about how they died. It's about how they lived, and it's about how you remember them. That's going to be the legacy that they leave. It's going to be the stories that you pass on to their friends or your loved ones, about them, that gets remembered. And so just live in those memories and cherish those memories.
Thank you, Brittany. Tayana?
I went first.
Oh, you went first. That's right. All right. So Brittany talked about legacy. How are you choosing to live out the legacy of your loved one? Yes, ma'am.
I have I'm doing a mother to mother brunch. I had one last year, and it's going to be annual, and it's going to be on Cameron's birthday. This year it fell on Mother's Day, so we're going to go a day before. And it's a mothers to mother brunch, and it's just bringing mothers together that has lost a loved one, that has lost a child. It doesn't matter how they lost it. Like I said, that doesn't even matter. Just to pour into them, allow them to know that they're not the only one. Like you said, grief, we all have to go through it. And I'm going to start a foundation in his name with mental health. So those are two of the things that I'm tackling right now. But the mother to mother brunch is what I have. That's one of the accomplishments that I have made so far.
I love it. And we are going to support you in that process. So make sure that you reach out to us if you need any assistance or help. Make sure you reach out to us. I love that. Anybody else? How are you choosing to live out the legacy of your sister Brittany, of your brother Tayana, of your son Mr. Alita? How are you choosing to live out that legacy?
For me, I would say I'm still exploring and developing the story of what I want it to be for me with my brother. But one thing I've made clear for myself is that my brother, um, he wasn't hesitant to speak the truth and to own who he was. And so for me, speaking my truth and using my voice is, and platforms like this is something that I'm challenging myself to continue to move forward and do. Yes, I'm a counselor. Yes, my job is to help other people, but it's just something within using my voice and the testimony that I have um, to another level of for me that's connected with my brother, and providing justice for people that have lost someone due to like you said, unexpected circumstances, whether it be someone being killed or um, anything violent that may happen. I feel like using my voice for people to understand the importance of justice and the importance of us speaking out to us being impacted, because a lot of times people take it on as we just deal with it. We know how to deal with pain and hurt, and it doesn't affect us the way that other people may be affected, and it's not true. And so to normalize that we have pain and that we have a voice, and again, like you said in the beginning, it has power, you know.
Yes, yes, I love it. Our voices do have power, and what you all did today was use your voice. And we have to continue to do that. Miss Darlita or Brittany?
I haven't made up my mind yet. There's another young lady who I'm friends with on Facebook who's also lost her son, and she has a Facebook page, and every now and then she will post things on there, and we just talk that way. But my goal is to find an organization. I've been researching this too, to support veterans who have been diagnosed with PTSD. So that's my goal, is to support them. That's what I want to work towards, because that's how my son came home from the military. So yeah, that's my goal next, and just to use my voice in a way to help.
Awesome. Miss Brittany?
So I'm living and honoring my sister's legacy by immediately after losing her, I just became more well versed in the world of mental health. I began taking as many training classes as I could. I invested in mental health first aid, behavioral health first aid, and I incorporated more of that into my work with college students, and just being aware of the mental health resources that were available on campuses and creating those spaces for the students that I worked with. I also got involved with some of the walks that the Out of the Darkness group does, and that's for suicide awareness and prevention. And then I have lately been continuing to work through my grief of my miscarriages. I'm working with a friend of mine, and she started a group called the Unborn Angel Society. So just giving women who have had miscarriages or are suffering from fertility challenges, especially Black women, a place to speak and to be heard, and to also gain resources about their experiences.
Whew, I said it before. I'm going to say it again. These women are powerful. And I really, really, truly appreciate you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk about your loved ones, but not to just empower yourself, but empower somebody else. These ladies have said it, that it's time to use your voice. Though you have been through this pain, though you have been through this difficulty, though you have had those nights where you have cried, though you have had those nights where you have asked God why, you have to use your voice, because when you use your voice, you step into purpose, you step into power. So I just want to encourage you all of you who are listening, first thank our amazing panelists. Thank you to Miss Tiana Hayes, Miss Darlita Adams, Miss Brittany Clarkson, and Miss Marquita Mitchell for sharing their stories about their loved ones. None of these ladies had to come on today, but they did. and they did willingly. And sometimes when it comes to grief, we do not want to talk about this. But Queen of Resilience is taking the time to strongly have a conversation about what's really happening in the community, what actions we need to take to make our community better and deal with the real issues. So I want to take the time for anyone that may once again in contact with you all, if you can share your different platforms or how they can contact you. We're going to start with Miss Tayana, then we're going to go to Miss Dorlita, then Miss Brittany, and then Miss Marquita.
Okay. I could be found on Facebook. My first and last name Tiana, Teyona Hayes, Hayes.
Thank you, Tayana.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Darlita Adams. I see my mentor, Liz Morrow, just popped up and said, "Awesome job, Queens." Liz and I, we actually went through breast cancer together and supported one another. That's my sister. I love her, my mentor. But you can reach me on Facebook at Dorlita Adams, my name, Dorlita, last name Adams, or on Instagram at Dorlita_Adams.
Thank you.
I can also be reached on Facebook. My name is Brittany with an I, Brittani Clarkson. Just send me a message and I'd be more than happy to talk.
Thank you, Brittany.
I'm not on Facebook, but I can be reached on Instagram up under Quita J5. That's QUITA J5.
Thank you, Miss Marquita. Again, thank you all for taking the time to listen. If you did not hear anything in this conversation, I definitely encourage you all to go back and listen. These ladies have dropped so many gems that we need to apply to our lives. But I just want to leave you with this. Keep going, stay together. We belong to God first, and take time to heal. I want to say that again. Keep going, stay together. We belong to God first, and take time to heal. And most importantly, use your voice. Thank you for joining this amazing conversation. And you all have an amazing, amazing evening. Again, my name is Pamela A. Davis. I am the founder and CEO of the amazing organization called Queen of Resilience. And you can contact us through www.qornow.com, www.qornow.com. Have an amazing evening.